are back. I would like to start this afternoon with just a quick recap of what happened in each session. So I know that we have some volunteers that would like to have a recap for each session. Avi Bert, for example. Yes, I will give you the microphone, and if you can just quickly, if you want to come also here to tell us a bit what happened.
We were the second parallel session, I guess, with Sarah and Jasper and also Alina. We talked on the data profiles that are used and the fill-in books. I don't know the right translation. In the end, we also practiced a little bit with fill-in form to see if all the fields were available in the data profile. And we discussed the number of fields, the kind of fields, what was needed, what was missing. But I don't think there were many fields missing within the data profile. Yeah, Sarah. That's a good thing. But what we experienced within our group is that we all, from the different institutions, we all have a different perspective to work with these artist publications. Middelheim prefers or suggests to work in both or in two modules, the object one and the library one. For me, it's a difficult perspective because we only work in the library module for the artist publications, although we also have like artist books that are registered in the object catalog. So it's a very difficult balance between the two, and it's also the history of a book that is entering. We talked about donations or an artist book that comes with an object into the museum, and then obviously it is also registered in the object catalog, but on the other hand, teams should collaborate a little bit more and discuss a little bit more which is the ideal situation. So it's a bit fluid situation for the moment, I guess. But it's good that we talk about it and that we hear each other's perspective and learn from it, I would say.
Thank you very much. Would you mind saying where you work for those that don't know your background, please? Sorry.
I work in the Museum for Contemporary Art in Antwerp in the library.
Thank you. And another person is Ine Bogmans. Could you also introduce yourself, please?
Yes, of course. Hello, my name is Ine Bogmans. I am the librarian of the Royal Academy. I work right there. I had the pleasure of attending the lecture of Alison Norton and Ellen Kronholm of Middelheim Museum, which was about the question of preserving artist publications versus how to interactively display them in exhibitions, which was very interesting but very hard to summarize. I made a lot of notes. I'm going to try my best. First of all, the main question is that a museum has a duty of preservation and needs to make sure that the copies that they are handed are there for future generations as well. But there's also the issue of public interaction. Even when you display an artist's publication fully, but you put it under a shelf, it's still a static display, and it might not be what the artist had in mind when they made the work. Artist books are made for handling, but how do we balance this with the preservation duty? Hang on. This question is essential because, as Alison said, if you keep an artist publication hidden and safe that is not in the best interest of either the publication, the public, or the institution. So we need to look for a solution. A couple of options that were discussed were either an open display, but with very clear instructions on how to handle, making films of artist publications being handled, which could also be used as guidelines, combined with written instructions, a case of medium interactivity, where visitors cannot touch the actual publication, but they get a sense of, like, you can pull open a shelf and see part of the publication, like a sort of trick. But then also let the public interact fully. And here there's a bit of a clash between what artists might prefer with their publication and what a museum might want to do with them. Very important is dialogue. This was something that came back over and over. Talk with the artist, talk with the curator, talk with the conservation party of the museum. Let everybody have a dialogue before and during and after. Make sure that you collect all the information on what the artist has in mind, but also the specific details on, for example, what glue was used and stuff like that. Very important. I also wrote down, often there is a problem of control freakery. Sometimes the museum also needs to learn to let go a little bit, but it's often a balance and clarity for the visitor. If you present a work to be handled by the public, make sure that they know what they can and cannot do with it, even if they ignore the instructions. Then we got a bit into almost philosophical discussion about the making of copies. Can you present a copy of an artist publication instead of the real deal to protect the original from being handled and destroyed? And there's not one good answer to this question. It depends on the work, it depends on what the artist wants, and it depends on what the museum wants to do. So no clear answer on that one. I thought the idea of exhibition copies was very interesting, especially in times of digitization, but also if the original is digital anyway, and the museum acquires a digital copy, why could they not make a print themselves? And then there were questions of sharing via open source and open data the digitized files between museums, so not every museum has to make the same copies over and over again. Also think about climate change. I wrote down. Yeah, but I wrote down everything because it was really hard. But to summarize, there needs to be a dialogue between all the parties involved. And also, every organic thing has a limited lifespan, and we should learn to accept this, which I think is beautiful.
Thank you. Very beautiful.
Thank you. It was very intense. And now I look at Nico for the first session you had. We introduce ourselves because it's nice to understand what are our backgrounds and our interests. I learned a lot about interest of people that were present, and we quickly started talking about indeed experiences we had with books. We started showing books. Nico presented some of his publications and giving us a background, giving us the reasons and the conceptualization of everything that happened, the history, which was a very nice, interesting story to keep with us for a long time. I think some people are interested in getting your books, I think. What else? We mentioned, a bit of historical definitions. We were mentioning livre d'artiste instead of multiples. What does it mean to define things? What does it mean having 1, 2, 3 publications? How you call them? We had a discussion about that. We mentioned also something about staying in the world with the physicality of it and the consequences of maybe decay and seeing the books just disappearing for some artists like Sofinis. I wasn't prepared for this, sorry. We talked a lot about collecting as a practice. Because both Johan and Nico are also collectors, so how you get into this system, how you get into this distribution of books, how to get outside of this commercial circuit, how to use your networking and having a sort of performative action in, you know, talking, discussing with friends, giving them your books or exchanging them, showing them. We talked about what happens when things are out of print. Nico apparently buys his works back when they're out of print, because most of the time it's one-off publication. And then we discuss about space and trace, authorship, and I think that's it. A bit, yeah, the distinction between private and public, what makes the book private and public. Yeah. Do you agree? Yes? Okay. So this was a bit of a recap of the 3 sessions, and now we are moving to the symposium. I'm very happy we have our panelists today with us. I start from left to the right. We start with Nico Dockx. We had the introduction about him this morning. Gustavo is also with us. And now I have to keep time. I'm sorry about it. I get a bit stressed when I'm late. And we have also with us Thurmann-Jajes. That is the head of the Center for Artist Publication in Bremen. It's a gigantic, interesting place with 90 different archives, funds and collections. And the Center for Artist Publication represents one of the largest and most significant inventories of published artworks in Europe. It counts among the most important institutions worldwide in the field of artist publication due to its outstanding inventories, numerous exhibitions, and tailored research activities. Comparable to a museum within a museum, the center constitutes an independent department within the Wesenberg Museum for Modern Art and is co-founded by the University of Bremen and the Wesenberg. It was founded by Thurmann-Jajes in collaboration with Sigrid Schade. And last but not least, next to me, Mica Gherghescu, who studied at the Higher Institute for Social Science in Paris. Her work focuses on the language invented by artists in the French space after the 1945. Her current research focuses in forms of linguistic invention, concrete and visual poetry, forms of writing, and other discursive practices in the artistic field. At the same time, she's carrying out extensive research on the corpus of modern and contemporary artistic periodicals and vectors of internationalization of knowledge, as well as on their editorial policies at the time of different artistic modernities. She was associate curator for the festival Nouveau in 2013 for the Imaginary Languages section. She was also responsible for research for the Marshall Reis retrospective at the Centre Pompidou in 2014. She prepared an exhibition file around the figure of Aimé Césaire in 2016. I keep it here. Wait. And maybe I give the microphone to you. You came with some thoughts to share with us, so it would be nice to start with it. So if we can have the presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Johan. Thank you, Nico, for this invitation. Thank you, Maestro, because I didn't know what to prepare, actually. And I'm very rigorous, so I presented a little institutional flaunting for those who don't know what Bibliothèque Kandinsky is. So it's somewhere in Paris, in the center of the Paris. So it's somewhere there on the third floor, on the south part of the Centre Pompidou, and is there since 1977. It has been created as the documentation center for the Museum of Modern Art in 1977, and it was the major tool for the curatorial and conservation team of the Museum of Modern Art, and it had actually two legacies: the legacy of the Modern Art Museum and the legacy of what was called the Contemporary Art Center, who documented vivid and contemporary artists and had a very important documentary watch to gather all the ephemera, invitations, catalogues, and all projects by living artists. So it's on the third floor. You have a glimpse in the maquette of this little library, and filled with mirrors, filled with transparencies, and I think that this mirror effect is reflecting quite well our layers of histories and the quality of the collection. A collection that progressively became patrimonial, a collection also that today can also say that keeps roughly around 13,000 artist books, from which 8,500 and something are the livres d'artistes, what we call livres d'artistes as a canon, as a definition, very different from the livres illustrés, once again, the French definition, around 1,600 and something, livres objets, object books, and photography books. So it's a very encompassing, ambiguous definition of identifying these objects in our collection. And roughly, you have also a big chunk of this collection collected starting from the 70s that hasn't necessarily been identified or defined as artist books or artist objects. So it is something that you are used to see as this in the long history of modern art. So yes, there is surrealism. So yes, there is outsider art and books by Jean Dubuffet, also artist books. So there is all the generation of the 60s and the 70s, French international, ephemera, all kinds of printed matter production, going beyond any boundary of terminology and of medium. And you have, of course, several captions of this important collection with different flows that nourished the collection. Artists, galleries, artistic institutions, photographers, different practitioners, cultural practitioners that gathered documentary material. And a small parenthesis, going back to the discussion this morning about how to photograph these books. This campaign of photographies was made, I believe, in the 2000s, when the collection was on a turning point by acquiring a very important patrimonial nature and dimension, and it became all the more exhibited in the collections, in the permanent collection. And it goes on and on and on. So it is this kind of stuff that we keep and we preserve and we make available for research, for exhibition, for writing, for publications. And it allows us to have different trajectories in the history and to go back and forth from Kandinsky to current practices. And I wanted to show you in a way this timeline that expanding a little bit the notions of what to do with artist books and how to curate them and how to work with them. Because you have different histories, different ways of telling those histories. The first artist book is Johann Raban-Maur, 15th, 16th century, Stéphane Mallarmé, why not The Klänge by Wassily Kandinsky? Why not futurist and Dadaist Iliast, beautiful Lidantou Faram, how to qualify the Satyricon by Petronius, illustrated by Derain, but where Derain is very involved in that project. So probably what is quite interesting in our type of collection is that beyond the acquisition and the entering in the collection of items as artists, qualified as artist books, we have an important part of private archives and archival holdings. And artist books came in our collection also through that bias. And it's an important way to see and to displace a little bit the reservoir of artist books. And the fond, Guy de Cointet, major performer, French performer, gone American, kept at Bibliothèque Kandinsky, can also contain all the process of building an artist book, from the maquette to the actual and definite product, and so on and so forth. So this is I'm trying to show you very quickly, very quickly, a process, and the process that we are trying to value and to explore in our collection. And it goes on and on and on. With Cointet, with the Paris Biennial collection that allowed us to keep very early on beautiful books by Jaroslav Kozlowski, or one of the first books by Laurie Anderson in '72, under the radar, years and years. Or Richard Long's Mexico and photography books that also give you a certain genetics of the material and show you that this kind of books were roughly labeled in the general documentation and then requalified as artist books in the collection once we have redefined and indexed the collection, and so on and so forth. Archival holdings that also keep major canonical books. So, and on and on. So this is the part of the flaunting, that having that sphere and that dynamics, that mobility, that heterogeneity also of this collection, from Rouchet to Boltanski, from Buren to Vostell, who was sending to Pontus-Sultan as a mailbox his own artist book, from Cobra, post-Cobra artists to conceptual French artists, from this to that, and on and on. Playing cards, Anna, for you. Ronnie Horn, for you, Anna. Artist magazines, from very confidential productions done in Malmö in the 60s to Little Cockroach collection or to Erneste. And of course, different photographies. That it's a process, it's a full circuit, if you like, who tries to understand the artistic practice. And I won't be long on this part because there is, of course, photographical campaign. There is documenting the artistic practice that we are trying to do, and we try to do during several projects, but also understanding how to mediate and to reactivate that process and that collection today, and for whom. And I wanted to evoke and to stop probably of one of our format that I had the pleasure of organizing since 2014, the Summer University, based mainly on primary sources at work, where we put that collection in the hands of the researchers. We are displaying it, of course, with all the conservation precautions that are necessary, but we are giving access directly to researchers, to scholars from different disciplines, anthropologists, sociologists, economists, artists, graphic designers, and so on and so forth, to play a little bit with it. And we gather around this 5x2 huge table that displays documents inside, and we discuss. and we display, and we redisplay, and we talk once again, and we just look at some cartoons, and we display again, and we stay masked post-COVID, and we display on screens, and we debate, and we eat pastèque, and we publish these kind of things. Journal of the Summer University, associating artists, associating graphic designers. I will share with you 2 issues that might be of interest for you. They are not your regular Centre Pompidou publications, but these are issues of the Summer University that play with the format and try to become source of a source and to give access to the collection. We are now at our 9th issue, and you are here, and we are working also with graphic designers from different educational backgrounds and practices. And you have here on your right hand, in intergalactic premiere, world premiere, our next 9 issue of the Summer University Journal, which is also related to our collection of queer documents and archives. So I will stop here because I think that we are very short on time, but I'm really open to any discussion.
Thank you very much. While we leave some time to the public to come up with questions, we will open the panel. What would you say when you will go back tomorrow home?
Yes. Hello. What can I bring to Bremen? In one of the talks today, it was about the rights. And also in Middelheim, the question is how to deal with the rights and with the copyrights with the artists, because that is a big problem. And maybe I go a little bit back, because the Center for Artist Publication had 3 departments, one for exhibition, one for research, and one for the collection. And the collection is around 100, no, let me say the inventory are 100 different archive estates by artists. It's around between 300 and 1 million artworks. And our database looks like we have an online database, not everything it's in, so we have some collections or archives. We recently could finalize it, so we stay in the center. And there are only a few images in this database. And often I get the problem that the visitors or researchers or from the universities around Europe, we collaborate, that there are no images. Of course, they are private archives, they put everything on. Everything is with images. But we, as an institution, we have a very strong copyright in Germany, and the VG Bildkunst was looking for the rights for the artists, not allowed to put something online. But we have to pay for everything, for each single image we put on Instagram, for everything, and we have not the money to do this. And so there is a European right, since some years, that everything what's online, on each image what's online, it's already clear for everybody can use it. But this is not the German copyright. So that means in Germany we have really to take care, and nobody more or less wants to have something online because everybody after the European law could use it. So the artists can control their own images of artworks. That's the situation of the European line. So that means in Germany nothing happens anymore online. And so it's like a dead end. There's no solution. And so So the last project I made was to have a more artistic website, to have a very simple access to our collections. So we created a website, Artist Publication Lab, which looks like a universe. And so you have floating images. These are 400 works by artists online. So you can see it. It's Artist Publication Lab or apl-weserburg.de. And we have to deal the copyright with each artist directly. So for this, we have a contract of 6 pages. And the artist said, what does it mean? It's so complicated. And often they don't understand it. But this is the basics to do something online. And it is very complicated. And so to deal also with this, we have a working group for all art archives in Germany and in the German-speaking areas, so Austria and Switzerland, to work together in this art archive and collections, to come together to find solutions for this. And one solution come up in the morning, maybe we have to come together to create a working group Europe-wide, because this problem is only solved politically, and we have really to do a big impact to find solutions. And I think one of the central point will be the Europeana. And there was a solution in Germany with the DDB, the Deutsche Digitale Bibliothèque, but because of this copyright problems with the European Union, there was no solution anymore after this. And we have around 24,000 artists in our collection. There's no chance to find a solution for this. Many artists, we have no idea how to find out. In Asia, in Africa, in Russia, everywhere, so our collection is international. It started now around 1917 with the Style publication, but the general collection is starting in the, with the Cobra, so in the late 40s. And, you know, it's all languages, international, many artists, to find out the estate or the copyright owner of Ulysses Carrion. You can forget it. And so many artists, there's no chance to find out. So they're trying to find a solution for this. Yeah, that's maybe something to go further, maybe to find solution on a European level.
This is very interesting. I'm looking at Mica and Gustavo that are coming from non-Belgian situations. What is also the situation of copyrights for you? Mica, the question started from you this morning, if I'm correct. Gustavo, please, if you want to...
No, simply that the French legislation is extremely strict in terms of publication of images, and of course there has to be a federated or aggregated decision, political decision, in order to go beyond national legislations that are very restrictive on public rights. Of course, there is the fair use legislation that can serve as a product, as starting point, but to be applied on European scale. But I think that the question is complex, because at the same time you have to protect artists also for misusage of that material, and you have to find the right solution that protects the artists also and their practice. And once again, I join what was said this morning, I don't know by whom, that giving access to the entire item, it's not necessarily the best solution either for artist publications that have a materiality and a printed matter.
Yeah, but that's true. but it could be maybe a chance. We have an artist book to make an image of the cover, but this is not possible, you know. So to find a solution to protect the artist, but also to have the chance to make something available online. So this, yeah, we have to find solutions for this.
Nico, you wanted to say something? Cool.
Yeah, to come to copyright, because I face a lot of copyright issues, not per se for myself, but with the people I work with if I start to publish things, which I sometimes find very disturbing because it blocks information to circulate. And this morning, I don't know who said it, but with each publication I make, or whether it's an artist book or a regular publication, there is of course a digital file because I bring it to the printing place to print. So imagine I'm not here anymore and somebody is going through the archive. I think there should be the potentiality to still produce these objects because many of the publications are out of print, but the digital files are still there in order to produce again. I mean, the Brota's book I talked about, if I have a few more copies, but if it's out of print and somebody wants to reprint, I would be happy because it means that it can reach another few hundred people and the object circulates. But I feel each time I'm working with an institution, these are very difficult things to convince people that there is this freedom. And I really, as an artist, I promote this freedom of circulation of information. And now, not recently, I mean, some people know the book because I gave it already to a few people, but I worked on a book of 25 years practice. I collaborated with hundreds of people in the last 25 years. And now a few estates of people that I knew very well, but they died. But now I have to deal with the families. They block me from circulating the things I did with these people. So it's a shared copyright, let's say. So I can publish it if I have the copyright also of the person I collaborated with. But because I don't get it, it gets blocked from any circulation, also my work. So it's a very, and sometimes I think we should abandon this notion of copyright in order to have a free circulation of ideas, because I think, ideas are there, they circulate, but they don't belong to anyone. I take it down and I realize it into some shape, but then Gustavo can take the same idea and realize it in another shape, or maybe a shape that is very similar, but there is still a slight difference. And I think the more interpretation that can happen on the same idea, I think the more interesting in order to learn or to have things circulate. But I face a lot of problems. Now I published this book. It was a big effort to do. And now I have to think, am I going to burn this book? Am I going to do interventions in it in order to go around these issues, which I did with the Brota's book, where I just found a way to manipulate and fight the system with their own tools. But yeah, there's also a limit. I mean, you can never always find the right solution to that problem, especially if you have to deal with a huge and very multidisciplinary or very diverse archive. But yeah.
This is a personal view, not representing the Tate gallery, but I do feel that it's completely unworkable for a healthy culture, and it's primarily about protecting the revenue of corporations, and it's not really designed at all with something like artist publications in mind. Nevertheless, it is the law. In the UK a few years ago, there was change in legislation to allow, for instance, digitization for preservation. So there are some exceptions in the law, but there are minimal exceptions. And of course, you can only then use those images on dedicated terminals on site. You cannot put it on the website. If you want to do that, then you have to go through all the copyright clearance, which is incredibly time-consuming and expensive. And again, it's something that when you have got the connection with the artist directly, quite a few years ago, we did relatively small project digitizing the Artist Multiples collection at Chelsea. And I mean, from memory, 97, 98% of the artists that we managed to trace. They gave us permission, and they were very happy for us to put the content online for educational use. In a big institutional environment, sometimes there is more appetite for exploring what may be possible that you may think. I think that sometimes institutions can be incredibly conservative in their approach to risk. At Tate, for instance, we have an excellent copyright manager that gives us advice on these issues, and sometimes we may take an informed decision about taking a small risk when we think it's justified. You know, if you are digitizing a piece of obscure ephemera that no one really will be able to trace the artist, you're taking a small chance of, you know, someone discovering that their work has been put online without their permission, and they will be right that we, you know, we will have some defenses, and that we will have a disclaimer, and we have tried to contact the person, and we have done our due diligence. But sometimes you can justify that in some context that is a reasonable risk for a big institution to take, but it's not something that all institutions are happy to do. And I mean, I'm sure that many of you will be familiar with the book Duchamp is My Lawyer by Uwe Webb, Kenneth Goldsmith, sorry. Where he makes a really interesting argument, you know, for free sharing of material that is obviously out of print and not commercially viable. And, you know, I think that it's very hard to argue with the moral argument and intellectual argument. Another question is whether you can convince administrators or managers within institutional settings that is a risk, or what level of risk they would be prepared to support. So it is a hugely complicated question. I agree that you know, changes in legislation will be the ideal, but yes, I mean, it may take some time.
And this conversation makes me think about what are the possibilities now. We are thinking about copyright for things that exist, but how can we change things for the future? Having the artist engaged into the copyright topic while producing it from the publishing moment. How do you see this? It's definitely a big political topic, but is there something small that can be done? But I wonder if there are those little kind of resistance actions that can be done to still protect the artist, but through dialogue.
This is the only one we can do, and we are doing. So we are definitely permanently in contact with the artist, and so we share this information with the artist. So we're working directly with the artists.
I completely agree with Anne, but I wanted to shift a little bit the discussion, because if there are we are in this situation is because also the artist publications became a very important commodity, and there is for different productions, for different artists, I'm not saying for everything, but there are some creatures that completely engage in that process with a very important market, with speculative market, with a retrospective market that is extremely costly. So I think that things are connected and explain or give a certain point of view for even for the right situation, and a form of we've evoked during your session a certain mannerism of artist publications that engage in the label, but not necessarily in the content, or not necessarily in the quality of the reflection or the intention. So I think that there are several issues at work.
Is there anything else that you would like to add, or any other thoughts? Maybe also moving away from the copyright topic that you
From
would
the
like.
money copy from the money topic.
For the money topic, yeah, if you want to go more philosophical, or I think today we had a lot of moment of sharing also interesting things that that could be taken with us. But I leave it up to you. I would like to ask you: is there a
Plenty of thoughts, of course, but probably something that I gathered is where to place in a collection that product or that item. Is it in the art collection? Is it in the special collection of the library? Is it in a current documentation, because some artists don't want to be rarities, they don't want to be preciosa. I think that for the Pompidou case, we've seen that shift with major historical items like the Fluxus boxes. Some of them are in the art collection, some of others are in the special collections of the library, and we can go on and on with objects that fall between media and that could suit also in the photographic collection, that could go well in the architectural collection. So how to place and where you decide, where is your decision making when it goes in a special collection or where it goes in the modern or contemporary art collection at Tate?
So the library has got curatorial responsibility for artist books. So artist books come to us in principle, and unless it's a one-off unique item, there could be very, very exceptional cases where that is not the case. But as in general, the artist books should come to us. I mean, like with any other definition or boundary, we can start teasing where things overlap, where, for instance, a print portfolio start and loose publication finishes, for instance, So there are areas where we could have discussions with our colleagues in curatorial, because prints and drawings are a completely different department from lab and archive. We also have got a lot of fun having discussions within the department about what should go into the archive as opposed to what should go to the library. Because again, what is a published item, in principle, is quite straightforward. In practice, maybe not so much. It's a folded piece of ephemera. Is it a publication? Is it if it came with an artist archive, should it be added to the library collection? Should it stay within the fonts of that archive, so on and so forth? I think the one thing I would say is that I don't think in this matter, like in many others, there is one answer or one solution. I think that different institutions should do different things according to what the mission is, what the users need, what resources they have. And I suppose the key argument really is to develop collections of artist publications that are accessible to the people that can benefit from engaging with them, as opposed to, as far as I'm concerned, everything should come to the library. But then I'm a librarian, you would expect me to think that.
But that means only in the library they are accessible for the public.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, for this, in the Center for Artist Publication, then we have an exceptional situation because the center is related to artist publication in general. So that means we have 17 different sub-art forms, from artist books, magazines, newspapers by artists, records, cassettes, radio art, photographs, and so on, so 17, and everything is together. So that means also when we have took over an archive or an estate by the Nazis, and there are some originals. So because of the provenance, everything keep together. And everything is accessible for everybody coming to the center. So that's what is not normal. So, and really they can have, the originals can have very special pieces, and not the very expensive or the very well-known artists going to the art collection. Now, artist books, all the artist books, it doesn't matter if it's very expensive or the artists are very well-known, everything keep together. And I know that it's in different parts, the originals going to the art collection, the papers going to the archive, the other ones going to the library. For us, everything is together. And also we have the archive or the collection, but also we have a library. So we have a library about, I don't know, between 15 and 20,000 publications. But this is about artist publications. So the library is about artist publications. And the artist publications are the art collection. And this is storage as artworks. And it doesn't matter if an artist book has a value of 10 euro or of 10,000 euro. And for research, I have to say that it's very important. Because for research, you need everything to see and to have an idea of it. And not only about these 2,000 things that are in the library. And you don't know, it is library, artists, so reference literature or artworks. So it's often really hard to say what's the difference between an artist publication and a normal publication. So that is, but for research, and we are as a research center, it's a very important focus on this. And if you see all the artist books, and then you can have a competition, you can see, you can find out what are developments, what are special kinds of how to say, that's exceptional works, or where are challenges, or however. This you only can see if you have an overview and you can see it. But if all this splitted, it's really complicated for research. So that is the point for the Center for Artist Publication. And I know that's not everywhere.
I completely agree with you. And I think that this would be a way of opening up and given a certain accessibility to other researchers also beyond the regular art historian or even the artist who has the usage of that library. We've had several examples that were quite interesting for us, starting from an artist book that was investigating genocide in Congo. You might have heard about it, is Frank Blebovici Bogoro, who used the evidence of the trial against studying the genocide. And several lawyers came to the activation of that book. For different artist books, we had economists, historians, sociologists who came to read those books. And I think this is interesting. Even a medical student who would find something interesting in an artist book, but because there is a shift of creativity there that happens, could have access to that artist book. And I think that this would be something to develop. So if my colleagues in Centre Pompidou will see me on YouTube, they will probably open their ears. But I think that nurturing different forms of public to access that collection, it would be brilliant.
I mean, one of the things that we have to, I agree completely. I mean, at the end of the day, the artist publications are still publications. That is the very point. We have a huge sign outside of Tate Library and Archive that says free and open to all. And we have been trying to expand our audience outside of the traditional research audience, because I agree completely. I think that artist publications have got interest to many others. So yeah, I agree completely.
They're not described properly, so to give that access. I think that when they were requalified, all the description, bibliographical description for the retrospective catalog, they have been enriched with themes, with keywords that allow a certain search. But for Christian Boltanski, of course, Shoah, the Holocaust, is one of the major themes. It's of major interest for historians and for visual practitioners. When you integrate that fine, very fine description in the bibliographical description, you give that access. It's a huge amount of work, I know, and it requires lots of time-based seeing, reading the book, understanding the book. It's time and money, as you said this morning, but this would give a huge access and a huge attractivity, I don't know if we say this in English, to the collection, to the collections.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, at Tate, we add both Library of Congress subject headings and in-house headings to all the artist publications, and we still do most of cataloging in-house, which is quite unusual and very expensive. But yes, I mean, cataloging is critical. Digitization can be useful. We, as I mentioned this morning, we have been experimenting with curated lists and things like bibliographies and reading lists and online guides. And I think that that could be a potentially another really good way into artist publications, you know, develop narratives about certain subjects, certain topics that open up the field to those that don't think that artist publications are necessarily something that they're interested in.
Nico, I saw you wanted to say something.
Yeah, Johan just asked me if I could talk about collaboration with SMAC in Ghent, the museum, but where to start this story? At some point, the museum in Ostende wanted to buy every single printed matter I ever produced, from invitation card, poster, book, vinyl, and it happened. So a lot of items went there. It was the only copy aside from the copy I have in my own studio. And at a certain moment, there is a change of directors. And so suddenly there was a silence, because they, after they bought the collection, then they started to buy every year all the printed matter. So there was a follow-up, and each Christmas I would bring as a Christmas gift the things I produced in that year. But then with the director shift, this process stopped. And I was a little bit frustrated, because the initial idea was that it would have a follow-up endlessly. So it was based on a kind of trust agreement. So it failed there, and then Philippe van Kouter, the director of the SMAC, picked it up and said, I want to continue, and let's make the contract immediately. So with him, I was capable of making a contract, which apparently says they give me a fixed budget every year, whether I deliver in that year one publication or 20 or 300, it doesn't really matter. It's the same price, which I think is interesting as a concept. It's more that it's not about buying things, but it's about supporting a praxis, like a continuation of your work. But then I was also interested to say, like, okay, it starts now, but I want to also transfer everything that is in the other museum in Flanders to what you do now, which was complicated, even though it's two Flemish museums. But so now it's all at SMAC, and they do it already for a few years now. But then in the meantime, parallel to this, they have conversations with me, because they have no, I mean, they are interested, but they have no clue how to deal with these things. Because in my case, I say it's part of my archive. So it's in my own practice, it's an archive. And then depending on whether it becomes library or collection is in the use. Because, for example, the Brothaers book I talked about in our session, yeah, for me, it's part of my archive because it's my process, my praxis. With the people that buy the book, it most of the time ends up in the library, so it takes that shape of being a book in a library. But then, if in the museum, at one point they also presented it in relation to the Un coup de dé of Brothaers and the Un coup de dé of Mallarmé, and then they tagged it with a tag of being a collection piece because it suddenly becomes a work in a show. But this I found interesting, this ambiguity of that same object that in my case would say it's part of my archive, of my working process. To some that have the book, they say, it's part of my library. And in the museum, they still have to think like, is it part of the collection, or is it part of the library, or is it part of an archive that we're building up with you over time? But this I found interesting, this kind of ambiguity and also the freedom of that object to say, now I go to France, now I go to Germany, or now I to shape shift and to have the freedom to travel and to become sometimes an entity in a library, sometimes an entity in a collection, sometimes a lost object, sometimes part of an archive, sometimes, I don't know, just printed matter, depending on where and how it gets used. So it's more about use value than about the economical value, I think, of the object. But maybe this didn't make sense.
Yes, it does. It does because it shows practice against administration.
Thank you.
It's also funny is that because in the meantime, what they have now in the collection of, or in the library or in the archive of the SMAC is an ensemble of close to 250 printed matters. And of course, the curators also start to think like, how can we present if we want to show it to an audience? Like, do we show it as a totality? Do we show one thing? And for the moment, I mean, it's not the case yet, but I tried to discuss with them that it could be more interesting to use these things as generators for something that still needs to come. So they can go with me when I'm still alive. They can say, let's go through all the items, select a few, and then use these objects as generators to produce something new. So to really use them as a performative element or as a performative act.
Thank you. We are running a bit out of time, so I wonder if we can start asking the public if they have questions. Straight to the public.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. It's so interesting to listen to you. So I could stay here forever. Anyone has a question? Yes, please.
Following the statement of Nico, my question to the three collecting people is, do you have any agreement with a living artist on to purchase the complete printed output of that artist and following up and going into debate and conversation with that artist? Because it gives a totally different dynamic than just buying isolated pieces on auctions or getting them through archives. Do you like actively engage with artists still producing their printed output?
Yes, of course, but not having a lifetime contract with the artist of having his entire production of printed matter. So on our side, I think that we have a selective principle given the collection and the coherence of the collection. But we do have long time, I wouldn't call them partnerships, but collaboration with artists that still, that we either purchase or receive in donation as a gift his production, of course.
In my case, because I didn't add it to it, but in the discussions, of course, when Philippe decided to buy everything and then talking about the contract, it was for me also important to not end up in the same situation with the previous museum when a director shifts that it stops. And so he was immediately saying like, well, it's up to you to decide when it stops. So now in the contract with the jurists, with the lawyers, it says that or if I die, it stops, or when I just am tired of collaborating with them. So if I don't produce anything anymore, then it stops.
We sadly we don't have anything like that. Again, we do have long relationships with artists, both at the Tate and particularly at Chelsea. At the Tate, it will not even be possible. It will be out of the acquisitions processes that we have in our national collection. Well, it would be interesting to try to make an argument for that sort of course and try to put it through the acquisitions process. But in principle, I don't think, certainly something that has never been done before.
Yeah, we have it also. So we have some artists, we have more or less an agreement, and they started that we take the first part of the estate, and then they complete it all the time. And so for artists, we're working really over 10, 20 years. So like Franz Mohn, we were in contact up to a month before he died. So it's really like a permanent partnership with artists. We have special estates or collection with.
Sometimes it can be the way around, having a situation of exhibition in the museum. It was the case for Christian Boltanski before he disappeared. He wanted to give us all the artist books that we didn't already have in the collection. So it was at his initiative to complete the collection. But you have different cases of collaboration.
Yeah, I had a quick follow-up question on that. As librarians, do you also get pressure from artists that want to pull out their work from your library, from your collection? So we see that now sometimes with museums, especially for political reasons. Does it also happen with libraries?
Ce n'est pas possible dans la collection française. It's never out. C'est patrimonial. Inalienable. No.
No, so we don't have this. We have only the other situation that the artist would be in our collection. So
I cannot think of any example at Chelsea, and it will be, again, impossible at Tate because it's a national collection, and by law, anything that goes into the national collection stays in the national collection. So.
Yes, I wanted to react on the previous question about the relationship between museum and then collecting the complete printed matter of one artist also. What I noticed when, especially estates, for instance, visit our museum and we take them to the library, that they do a checkup on what we have in the library, and then there are collaborations of completing it, because it's also in their benefit, of course. And they then often do findings from rare things that we did collect they don't have. So these kinds of collaborations do exist, but often with fin de carrière artists or their estates. So that's also an interesting approach to see. And which I find also interesting is that they then that you get this information on how the artist was involved on this printed matter. Because when we had a recent visit by Sophie Bonus, who is the granddaughter of Barbara Hepworth, you wouldn't imagine the sculptor Barbara Hepworth, you wouldn't associate her with our artist publications. But when she went through the pile of publications we had, she said, oh, this one was chosen, even she determined even the cover and the print. I would consider this as her artist publication. So it's super important also to keep this relationship, I think, and shifting significance and shifting, because it will change the status of what is once seen as just documentation on Barbara Hepworth, and now, well, this is maybe a very early artist publication, or Henry Moore even, because our focus is often on the canonized 60s, 70s and later, but then when you when you keep these relationships with the states, and they describe the roles of the artist in the making of the printed matter, that's sometimes super revealing. Of course, you have to be critical. They can invent things maybe, but it's often surprising that they say even also the daughter of Luciano Fabro, a sculptor, Arte Povera, came to our library, and then she said, okay, here. He determined the format, and he resisted the categorization he determined the typography, and then we found the drafts that he made for the publication. So keeping these relationships is super important, I think. And then also the ensemble, the complete printed matter, if it's possible.
Okay. Now I had to think of one project that I once did when I worked at my first ever job, which was at the Museum of Contemporary Art in the PMMK in Ostende, before Nico contacted the museum there. I hired Mark Goethals, a Belgian artist, as a curator to buy books as a kind of antithesis of the museum collection. So that's one of the efforts that I did, but I think the whole effort of engaging in a creative way together with an artist is something really to be investigated. Yeah, because it's completely opposite to the whole logic of a museum. But I think the whole of the benefit of what we're talking here about the ambiguity and the discussions that artist books give rise to or cause, I think that's one of the most interesting topics of all.
Today has been a very interesting day because we shared a lot of knowledge and practices. We listened to each other, and I think it's a kind of somatic practice that we are doing in the sector that is important to develop further questions. And every time we come together, we have more questions. So now we have some homeworks to change policies about copyright in Europe after today. Now, I hope you will go back home with a lot of food for thoughts. This is for sure something that I have. And I would like to thank all of our panelists, all the speakers, everyone that joined, everyone that participated in the project, the team of Middelheim and the Academy to organize this day. Now we will have a little reception. There's a, yeah, please.
There will be some drinks brought here, but I would also like to mention that at 6 o'clock they will be opening an exhibition of students' work in our big gallery with a big vernissage. And we also have an exhibition now of our jewelry work of our students and teachers in the space next to the restaurant. So hang around, stick around, drink a little bit, and then afterwards go to the opening. There you will see living works by emerging artists, not archived yet. Thank you very much. Yeah.